Hey everybody, it's Tammy, and thanks for joining me for today's video. I'm coming to you from my office. I was trying to do a Facebook Live, and for whatever reason, the technology is just failing me the last few days. So I decided to record it and kind of introduce what I'm wanting to promote. And potentially field some questions either via email. I would prefer that we do it in email as opposed to in the comments below. That's just because I can potentially answer you both directly as well as formulate a new video. I am coming to you from my new location here in Madrid, New Mexico. If you are a current subscriber, thank you very much for being a part of my journey, or sharing this journey with me, I should say. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I encourage you to subscribe. Click on the notification bell so that you receive updates when I do post new videos. If you go back to my archive of videos, you'll see there's been a transgression, or just an evolution, so to speak, of how this is all going. It is a process. Healing is a process, and where I used to come at this from a more conventional model, which was more about symptom relief, I've been heavily involved in the genetics aspect for well over 5 years. Genetics has been a part of my background since I was back in middle school, junior high school. And then I got into pharmacology. So if you're new, my background does include pharmacology, which includes the study of plant constituents in regards to drug development and their effect on the human genome. Now, the Human Genome Project wasn't released first until the early 2000s, although every time we voluntarily submit our saliva to these genetic tests, you are contributing to the international database where they continue to study the DNA and the impact of the environment and plants and so on and so forth. Hence why I'm here in more ways than one. In part, it is to shed light on facts and empower people. So what I'm presenting today, in all honesty, is a little bit different than the current marketable trends. Right now, there's an industry and money to be made when it comes to personalized wellness. Now, I'm not saying that we can empower health just through, wishing ourselves well. There are implements that we can include that make a difference. But it's a more mindful concept, number one. And number two, it's actually looking at the epigenome as if it's functional instead of looking at it as defective. And so today I'm all set to talk with people about epigenetics. In fact, epigenetic hygiene is what I'm calling it. It's my passion to actually teach this to as many people as possible, especially our kids, because everybody deserves a functional, healthy future, not dysfunctional or defective or declining health, as we are currently raising our children to believe, which is, you laugh and play and go to school and get an education and get a job and potentially get married or at least partner up with somebody, start a family, don't start a family, develop a career, and then eventually you get sick. And then from there, you kind of slow down into old age. And it's really not a model for life that I applaud. We need to be understanding that our health, for as much as we have no control over the external world, we have some say over it. And so when it comes to epigenetics, when I even use the phrase epigenetic hygiene, the first thing that comes out of people's mouths is, well, what are you talking about, epigenetics? The better way to say it, which most of you, if you're watching this, and you may already be very well familiar with, is the methylation pathway. You can see that. That's a chart obviously, of the methylation pathway. So epigenome, methylation pathway, kind of hand in hand. The epigenetics actually regulates the histones and the methylation methyl groups that affect oxidative stress and the quality of our health. That's what epigenetic hygiene is all about. It's about helping to regulate that. The way our current mindset is that you submit your saliva and you receive a profile. Oh, pardon me for one moment. I don't want, well, I can just fold it over. Bear with me a second. Okay, so this is oftentimes the reports, they come out looking something like this. Doesn't make any difference what company you look at. This one particular is a methylation profile. And I've got another one here that, I mean, these are just examples from clients that I have, because like I said, I have a history of work in genetics. I've actually worked with these tests. This is a detox profile. And what this is demonstrating is defects. This is, okay, so these are not my terms. This is the current term. Sometimes they're called polymorphisms. Some people refer to them as SNPs. Other people call them defects. But we look at something like this, and then we see, you know, the red, which is by what most people classify this as a double defect when it's red. Green is no defects, and yellow has one defect. That's basically how it's languaged. Like I said, I've worked with these with individuals. This happens to be an individual person's saliva sample result. I've worked in clinics where they've done this, and it's becoming more and more popular. I see it on Facebook. You know, get your ancestry, so to speak. But they're taking these tests, like I said, and producing these sorts of results. And the way it's termed is defective. Like I said, I also call them polymorphisms. They also refer to them as SNPs. And I personally refer to them as adaptations because, as I mentioned earlier, the epigenome can be a tongue twister. The epigenome regulates both methyl groups and histones. And the methyl groups are what we were looking at on this particular chart. And I'm thinking, you know, I mean, you can always look these up, but what I can also do is put a link in the description box for you so that you can actually print this particular document up for yourself so that you can actually see the letters and just kind of get a sense of what it is I'm talking about. When I say letters, I'm talking about acronyms for the different genetic complexes. So one of the questions I was asked recently was, what sort of examples and experience do I have? So let me just back up. Like I said, I've been heavily interested in genetics since I was a little girl. I was introduced to the Human Genome Project not long after it was officially released. Official findings, you know, the initial findings were released. I managed to find my way into the path of others who were beginning to work with more of a genetic concept to their practice in order to develop a personalized wellness, which just completely attracted me because that's what I'm all about. There's no such thing as a one size fits all. So that said, it didn't take me long to step away from this kind of practice because the way it was being worded to the individuals is that there's something wrong. Like if you look at this test and you see the red, okay, that individual was basically told that she's got problems here, she's got a problem here, you know, these are problems. Well, first and foremost, every problem has a solution, number one. And number two, that is so incorrect. Just because there's a red box and we have two genes, you know, a gene that's been, it's what they call, like I said, a double defect, which means that there's two alterations to that gene, basically deactivating it. They're told that that's defective. then the green one is okay, is all good, because everything's active and working just fine. And the yellow one, well, you got to be careful of. And then this is where people start to get into heavily into recommending nutraceuticals, because each one of these genetic complexes, as you will see on this particular chart, involve various types of nutritionals, such as minerals, choline or acetylcholine. Well, acetylcholine is produced through choline, your amino acids and so forth. So that's where these get in. This is what happens with this. Okay, so we get involved with, okay, well, you have a double defect here. This particular gene needs these particular nutrients. Therefore, we're going to pump you up with that. And then I've literally have met people taking 20, 30 different types of nutraceuticals to try and fix, to try and override these defects. So, not to repeat myself, but it's important to say the epigenome regulates the activity of the methyl groups and the histones. Another way to say that is the epigenome has the ability to regulate itself. It turns things off and on. And just because we see a red box doesn't mean there's something wrong. Our culture has it in our, we have created this culture where red is dangerous, or red is emergency. Okay, I'm sitting here looking at a truck for the fire department right outside my door here. And so that's another meaning for red, is that it's an emergency. Whereas green is all good. Green is also the color for healing. Green is go. Everything's kind of like, green is good. And then yellow is cautious, right? And we recognize that even with our traffic signals. And so I find it very fascinating that this color combination was actually used for these particular tests, because the first thing that signifies when you look at that is red. Oh my gosh, I've got all these seriously, you guys, I've actually seen even more red on a chart. But that alarms people because they see the red. So the thing that I want to point out is, as I mentioned, the epigenome has the ability to regulate itself, and it's quite possible that because our body is smarter than we're giving it credit for, actually deactivated, in this case, the COMT. The COMT gene complex was adjusted, adapted, altered. Its function was altered because it was required in order for the body to get over or get past or move through something. There was something that signaled the deactivation of that particular gene. Is it permanent? No. You see, these saliva tests are a snapshot of where you were on that particular day, because our own chemistry does this, right? If we lived in a bubble, we'd still see variations. We probably wouldn't see things as extreme. We would see variations. Now, the thing that's being promoted here, I'm looking, and even on some of these, on this chart here, you'll actually see where it talks about, superoxide, peroxynitrite. They talk about oxidative stress. Oxidative stress, as I've mentioned in other videos, is something the body actually produces, and it is in reaction to the body, what the body's been exposed to. So if there is something that we've been, that is potentially harmful for us, the body will make itself, it won't make itself, it actually takes care of itself. It develops, it creates what it needs to survive the moment. But see, that's the key factor. It's to survive the moment. What's happening is that our stress, and I'm not talking mental and emotional at this point, I'm talking about environmental. And that includes food additives. I'm actually going to start, if you're new to me, I actually have radio programs on Monday evenings, and it's called Out of Control. It's on KMRD.FM to stream it online. If you're in the area, you can listen to it on 96.9 on your FM dial. But like I said, it's called Out of Control, and it's all about stuff like this. And I'm going to go into things about pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. And I'm going to go, it's about uncovering and, like I said, shedding light on the facts that are not being discussed. And so oxidative stress currently in our health professional world is a bad thing. Free radicals, bad thing. And you've got everybody promoting anti-inflammatories, antioxidants. But the thing is, all the anti-inflammatories, all the antioxidants, and they may actually help relieve the body at that moment, but they're not changing the fact that the oxidative stress is still being produced. So that is, it is a function. So when you see, in this case, 2 red genes, or a gene with a double, with a red box, there's a reason for that. It's not defective. Now, does that mean you want this to be like this consistently? No, because this particular one is involved with neurotransmitters. So helping to stabilize your system is essential, but we can modify it. Examples are when the fight or flight reaction is kicked on, which, by the way, it doesn't show it on this one. Interesting. So at any rate, angiotensin 2 is produced, and the angiotensin 2 receptor is activated, and because the fight or flight response, because we have to elevate it. Part of the changes that occur in our system when our lives are potentially threatened is our blood pressure increases because it gets the blood moving. It actually there's an we need it. We need the blood flow. We need to be able to move. Okay, it's a natural reaction. So the angiotensin 2 receptor is activated, which then alters the function of the DPP4 gene, which is responsible for gluten and casein metabolism. We'll see what happens when angiotensin 2 receptor is activated, which you would actually see in one of these tests. The DPP4 gene stops metabolizing casein and gluten. How many people do we know who are on gluten and casein-free diets? Because the angiotensin is actually flowing. And this is where we are starting to see an increase in blood pressure and hyperactivity and so on and so forth. The DPP4 gene is not functioning and metabolizing the proteins because casein and gluten are proteins. But the second the threat goes away, that angiotensin 2 receptor gets turned off. This is what I mean by the fact that the body or the epigenome can be regulated. It can be modified. This is not a permanent thing. Now, there are times when you get into taking medications that it does create a change along the epigenome that is irreversible. So we have to find ways to counterbalance these alterations, because once one thing is changed, the whole system changes. This isn't just one thing. This is the challenge with medications, because when somebody gets on a medication, the medications are very targeted. They're very specific to the genetic receptors that they're trying to affect, and they're also very specific to regulating liver enzyme activity. Just because they're specific in that arena doesn't mean that it doesn't create change elsewhere in the body. This is the reason for stability with things like intentional nutrient-rich foods and the inclusion, absolutely the inclusion of essential oils. Why? Because the essential oils are primarily the plant parts that are being studied for the development of medications. Why? Because most medications, if not all, I don't want to classify them as all, but I would want to go out and say that they'd have to be, knowing the types of receptors they influence, are what's known as lipophilic. And lipophilic chemicals are what the body requires for genetic activity. Essential oils are lipophilic chemicals, as are many components, environmental estrogens, all these chemicals that we have in our air and in our food. That's the reason why I'm saying in this radio program, we're going to get into all these different types of things that are safe, generally regarded as safe, but they're chemicals. So the mindful inclusion of essential oils. I have to say mindful because many people are using essential oils, but because of the level of environmental chemicals that we are exposed to, understanding which ones are the best ones for your system is essential for stabilization. But that's, again, another reason why I say we can absolutely modify the epigenome. We can regulate it. This is the whole thing about epigenetic hygiene. Another example is in the oxidation of dopamine. We all know what dopamine is, right? It's the reward neurotransmitter. But dopamine has another role. It becomes oxidized in the body in the presence of heavy metals. Glutamate is an active component in this process. Once the threat of heavy metals is gone, because we don't have the ability to eliminate it, we have to store it. So dopamine is oxidized, and it takes the metal and it actually houses it in the brain. The substantia nigra, which is black, and it's called substantia nigra for that reason, that turns black with approximately 1 year after we're born. When we first arrive, that particular area of the brain is not black, but within the first year it turns black because of the amount of metals that we're exposed to. That's an extraordinary piece of information right there. So you have this ongoing oxidation of dopamine happening. You have an increase of people who are developing things like autism. We're seeing addiction at earlier ages. We're seeing anxiety. We're seeing, depression. We're seeing all kinds of mental and mood disorders, so to speak. And yet at the same time, within the first year of life, that area of our brain is like riddled with heavy metals. Okay, so that's one point. But the fact that I'm getting at is we have the ability to deactivate that oxidation process. And do you know what antioxidant that is? Is glutathione. You see, glutamate, as I mentioned earlier, is a significant component to this whole oxidation process because it begins the oxidation process and it also ends the oxidation process because glutamate is used to produce glutathione. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there taking glutathione supplements. I will say this much here. I'm probably going to go into it on my radio program as well. I know that I'm going to touch on this tomorrow evening. So this is Sunday, September 30th, October 1st. 6 o'clock Mountain Time is our next radio program. But the things that are produced in labs, all of these hormones, like vitamin D is a hormone, glutathione, which is a chemical the body is supposed to make, these things can be produced in lab. This is how we get supplements. But this is not the same thing as the chemicals that are occurring in nature, and in our case, in our own body. So first and foremost, glutathione taken as a supplement generally cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, and that's what needs to happen in order to deactivate the heavy metal process. So anybody who's telling you to take glutathione in order to chelate heavy metals, that's an improper statement, and I've actually say that because I've heard it and I've seen it written. It doesn't chelate heavy metals. It actually stops the oxidation of dopamine. That's a significant difference right there. So glutathione does help in keeping our bodies safe because it's also used when it comes to lead. Lead isn't getting stored in the brain. Lead typically gets stored in bone marrow and some other tissues. And again, glutathione is used because so is actually hydrogen peroxide is used in the storage of lead, and glutathione is one of the antioxidants that is used to reverse the excessive levels of hydrogen peroxide, because otherwise we go gray early. We end up with that peroxynitrate is the one for the hereditary disease, but yeah, we go gray early. We may see a higher increase in skin lesions, like boils and such, because we're not producing the hydrogen peroxide that we need to help. The hydrogen peroxide is being used for other things, just put it that way. And my biggest concern, honestly, is heavy metals. Whether it's the oxidation of dopamine or the use of hydrogen peroxide, the production of hydrogen peroxide in the presence of heavy metals, this says a lot about our environment. And so therefore we have a lot of inflammation and we have a lot of oxidative stress in our body, absolutely. So it is warranted to say we want to do anti-inflammatories. We want to be getting our antioxidants because it actually helps to relieve some of that stress, but it's not getting to the bottom of why we have oxidative stress and how do we turn that oxidative stress process off. This is where the oils come in. Because without question, scientists have been stating for centuries that there is no way, there's a force throughout nature that they cannot replicate. It's undefinable. They don't, but they know that they can't replicate it. And they've acknowledged the fact that nature has an astounding way of recognizing the natural over the man-made. So we have a war, so to speak. It's no wonder when I say that our bodies are the microcosm of the macrocosm. There's so much war and dis-ease and disorder around our world, but it's all reflective of what's going on inside the individual body. And because we have so many chemicals on this planet, our epigenome is at risk. It is looking like it's defective, but it's not defective. It's actually functioning at the best level that it can do in order to keep us alive. And it's kind of like partially stepping on an ant and watching an ant crawl away. That's kind of what's happening to the human body. And it's actually happening to our domestic animals as well. It's happening to our plants. It's happening all around the world. So how does a person protect themselves? Well, like I said, intentional nutrient-rich foods and mindful use of essential oils. And that's not to take away from anything that you're currently doing as far as medications are concerned. If you're doing herbs, you kind of want to make sure that you're not duplicating the mechanism of action. You might want to make sure that you're not overstimulating your system in a number of ways. But the fact is that herbs are not, well, they can, but adaptogenic plants are your better option for helping to work with the epigenome. I wanted to say something because, like I said, a lot of people say that, I talk differently, that they've never been told this before, that when they talk to other clinicians, it's like they got to take all of these supplements, possibly take a medication depending on what they're dealing with. They look at these tests, or they should look at these charts, and they see the potential for illness, and it's there. But I'm going to say, well, let me back up. When you look at something like this, okay, this is a similar chart down here, and I can provide you a link to this page too. You can actually read this for yourself. But it's basically, it talks about what epigenetics is, and they recognize on this that it is manipulative. You can actually manipulate the epigenome. Now, they have a lot of suggestions in the way of therapies as far as nutraceuticals are concerned. Let me actually read it to you. Targeted nutraceuticals, see, they said, but targeted nutraceuticals, nutrition, bioidentical hormones, and pharmaceuticals if and when they become available. That is their protocol for modulating the epigenome. But that's evidence enough to say that we're aware. This is the reason why we have, if you go into a number of natural health clinics, you'll see a lot of nutraceuticals, and they will actually have specifics. I'm trying to think, I'm just thinking off the one, particular product, PHP, for example. They have a lot of their supplement or nutraceuticals will actually have the names of some of these genes on them. In fact, I was approached about 4 years now. It's been about 4 years ago to actually create blends that would affect all these different things like MTHFR, CBS, BH4, nitric oxide, the NOS, CBS, like I said, BHMT. They wanted me to go in and actually, like I said, make a blend that would, I don't even want to say regulate, but it kind of influenced the activity for these particular genes. And I'm not going to lie to you, I did entertain the idea. It was very intriguing because I thought, at last, my work is being recognized. And it come to find out, I actually backed out of it because I realized that the more I was working with people who were taking some of these nutraceuticals, and I was duplicating the same thing. So for instance, if they were taking something for BHMT and I actually created a blend to help regulate BHMT, there would become a conflict, especially with people who were taking like methylation accelerators. Okay. The transfer of methyl groups is very possible. You can enhance the transfer of methyl groups with oils. But if you're taking a methylation accelerator and you're trying to transfer methyl groups with oils, you are going to blow the body out. It's just going to blow it into full on, it's going to create a huge problem. You're overstimulating the system. And so you're essentially stressing it, and you're going to create even more inflammation. See, this is where I'm getting at. Inflammation isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a sign that the body is overly stressed. This is the reason why we call it oxidative stress. So to actually combine oils with nutraceuticals, and they're doing the same thing, will blow the body out. You can see the same thing happen with oils and medications. You don't want to duplicate the mechanism of action. And so I backed out. I backed out of that. Number one, because I didn't want to do that. And number two, if you go back to something like this, okay, and then you start lining them up. If you did a whole family, everybody's would be different. I've seen whole families. I guess I could have produced a whole family, then you wouldn't have seen me on the screen. But if you line up a whole family, you might see some similarities, but basically it's all different. The red boxes are in different places. The green boxes are in different places. So it's impossible to make a blend, so to speak, for the MTHFR or the BHMT or the COMT or the NOS or the CBS. It's not possible to make a blend that works for everyone. And so I backed out. And at the same time, I recognize that they do have a benefit, but this is, again, the reason why you have to use it mindfully. And we can look at these pictures, these graphs, so to speak. It kind of gives me an idea of where you were, and chances are you're not probably very far off from where it is there. Just because you've maintained the same lifestyle, your diet has probably changed a little bit, maybe not at all. I mean, so there's, there may be some differences, and at the same time there aren't. So it's going to be kind of similar, but at the same time, I'm not looking at fixing one of these gene complexes any longer, because there's nothing wrong with it. Because who am I to come in and say, oh, COMT, bad, it's broken, it's defective, it's got a double defect on it. It's not my job to do that. My job is to look at that and go, wow, your body's working hard. And so what we need to do is we need to stabilize it. And this is where epigenetic hygiene comes in. Do you have to take one of these tests to improve the situation? At this point, no. For me, no. I can sit down and listen to what somebody has to say, and I can identify how, if their reactions to their food, whatever symptoms they may have had throughout their life. And I mean, certainly conditions, because I think, things like asthma and panic attacks and high blood pressure, these are all symptoms of instability in the body. But the more I can hear where you are, or read where you are, or what you've been through, the more I can start to place all of this and try to emphasize how we want to stabilize the system and where the body is really needing some help. But epigenetic hygiene is absolutely possible, and it does take a willingness to be open to function. I mean, and what I mean by that is to not buy into the mindset that the body's broken and that it absolutely needs our assistance to fix it. It needs our it needs us to listen to it, because it's nature. There's a synergy. We work together. And so it's not needing us to control it, but it is needing us to give it a hand, because right now it's at the mercy of the world. So understanding that it is functioning to the best of its ability. And let me just say this much. The immune system adapted during the time, at the time of the Black Plague, the world was being eradicated. Humans were being eradicated during the time of the Black Plague. Over 70 million people died. And then all of a sudden, it just went away. And what they've distinguished during the Human Genome Project is that there was a change to the human immune system, the major histocompatibility complex more specifically. There's an imprint on that immune system that altered, that shows that there was a change. And that change is the reason why we're sitting here. Now, our challenge is we are faced with a world full of technology that we have introduced over the centuries since that time. And now the immune system is struggling to survive. And these changes we're seeing happen right in front of our eyes. Things like autism. And we have health issues out to beat the band. And these health issues aren't because people need our help. These health issues are our bigger message. And my question is, are we willing to go deeper? Are we willing to take these current circumstances and see the bigger message? The bigger message is, like I was talking about earlier, heavy metals. What we're doing to this planet, what we're doing to ourselves. And if we're not going to change this overnight, if we did, Mother Nature would, Gaia would, she'd vomit. She'd vomit hardcore. So we can't make the changes overnight. It would be a great segue to actually shift out of this mindset that we have. And at the same time, we can start here. We can just start here. Change the way we treat ourselves. Change the way, help stabilize our systems. Help stabilize the systems of our animals. And the more we do this for ourselves, the more that we're going to change. I don't mean physically, but the way we react to the world, the way we react to one another, it's going to change. It's going to improve. Of course, the way we feel is going to improve as well. And people are going to see that. And we're going to inspire others to do the same. It's a ripple effect of wellness. So I've talked about this before, about being wellness warriors. Just take it on for yourself. Be generous with yourself. Know that the more you take care of yourself and the more that you believe in your body, that's what it is. That's what epigenetic hygiene is. It's about believing in your body. It's all adaptable. It's adaptable. We've seen it the way people adapt to different environments. We see it the way plants adapt to different environments. We see it with animals. The DNA can adapt. And it just takes knowing that and seeing it from a different perspective, that it is actually functioning. We cannot stop life from functioning. Our bodies may die, but that doesn't mean that nature will not continue to function. So if we want to maintain our level of consciousness right now, all we have to do is step into functional assistance and take epigenetic hygiene into the schools and teach our children that they absolutely have the power they need to be as healthy as they desire. And maybe we'll see a reduction in addiction, and we'll see a reduction in mood and mental disorders. I don't want autism to go away. I mean, seriously, some of the changes that have occurred are just magnificent. But I would like to see the level of anxiety and other stuff dissipate. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Please join me over on Synergessence on Facebook. The link is in the box below. And like I said, if you have any questions about any of this, I'll provide documentation for you as well. But I really appreciate you watching. And hopefully we can connect and I can actually do some Facebook Live talks and I can learn how to field the questions. So anyway, and I actually may have some people I may bring in with me to do them as well, because I just think this is an important topic, and I know there's other people out there that I've recently met would do well for you to hear as well. So anyway, thanks for watching. You guys take care.